Hello everyone. Today, I will be giving a presentation on riparian buffers and their significance to the Raritan watershed. To begin, I would like to introduce myself. My name is Sohan Saha. I am from and currently reside in the state of New York. I'm a sophomore at Rutgers University, New Brunswick, and I'm currently pursuing a major in biotechnology. I'm on the pre-med track, hoping to be a surgeon one day. So let's get into the presentation. So what exactly is a riparian buffer? As you can see in this diagram, a buffer refers to a vegetated strip next to a stream or river, providing numerous benefits to water quality and local wildlife. The buffers themselves are made up of a healthy mix of trees, shrubs, and grasses. They are all local, native species, and adjacent riparian buffers can be used as a guide. This mixture of different types of vegetation optimizes the different functions of the buffers. So what do? The buffers themselves provide habitat and complex ecosystems for many local plant and animal species. The trees provide physical shade over the water, which serves to lower temperatures in the summer. When water is cooler, it can contain more dissolved oxygen, allowing for more aquatic species to exist and thrive. Where buffers are lacking, sedimentation and erosion increase turbidity and contribute to siltation of water bodies, hurting water quality. Intact riparian buffers, however, can prevent this by stabilizing stream banks, where the roots hold soil together and make the stream more resilient to erosion from flooding. Probably the single most important service that riparian buffers provide is the filtering of pollutants from runoff. Especially nowadays and in New Jersey, pollutants like nitrogen and phosphorus, as well as pesticides and herbicides, are prominent in runoff, which all ends up flowing into our streams and ultimately our drinking water. This leads to a process known as eutrophication, where microorganisms such as bacteria and algae bloom and grow in huge quantities, such to the point where the amount of dissolved oxygen within the water decreases. This literally suffocates fish and other aquatic wildlife. The vegetation within riparian buffers can prevent this by absorbing the pollutants into the roots before they enter the stream. It is clear how important riparian buffers are to having a healthy watershed. So how are they especially relevant to the Raritan Basin? For starters, New Jersey is one of the most densely populated states in the country. Thus, there's a lot of human activity in the form of construction, agriculture, and fertilizer use in lawns. In fact, the primary purpose of riparian buffers is to ameliorate the negative effects that human activities can have on the watershed, and a large body of research exists to prove that riparian buffers can do just that. Specifically, non-point source pollutants are the worst of them, because we cannot trace exactly where they're coming from and thus cannot directly stop them. An article from the Journal of Forest Ecology and Management showed that a 10-meter buffer adjacent to a stream was able to prevent any negative effects to water quality when there is timber harvest upland. Additionally, with high population densities come large urban areas, as you can see in New Brunswick in the picture. These areas have high amounts of impervious surfaces, such as concrete and roads, which does not allow water to pass through. This allows water to pick up many pollutants and build up as runoff before entering streams. Alternative solutions, such as green infrastructure, for example, pervious concrete, is very expensive. An article from the Journal of Hydrology and Management of Forest and Wetlands showed that riparian buffers around a city were able to bring phosphorus and nitrogen to low enough levels before that runoff enters streams. So now that we know the essentials of riparian buffers and their relevance to the Raritan River Basin, we can look at problems. First and foremost, many areas within the watershed lack appropriate buffers. They may have them in some areas and not others, or none at all. These areas may lack sufficient funding as well. Furthermore, it is often these same areas that are dominated by minority groups who on average have lower incomes and thus disproportionately bear the burden of living in an area of lower water quality. Another problem is that there are not enough buffers in the uplands. The majority of miles of streams within a buffer is mostly within the lower order streams high up in the watershed, not with the wide rivers at the bottom. The way the buffers work is that they filter runoff of pollutants before those contaminants enter the stream. So even if robust riparian buffers exist downstream where rivers are wide, they can do little for water quality if the water coming in is already polluted. Also, riparian buffers must be contiguous in order to be effective, meaning one long continuous strip of vegetation alongside a river is ideal. The problem is what happens when buffers are fragmented is that runoff concentrates into narrow channels that run between vegetation, bypassing the buffer. This pretty much completely negates any benefit the buffer would provide. Riparian buffers can also be degraded over time without proper management and thus will not perform their intended function. So what are some things that we can do to fix these problems? There are a number of potential solutions. There has been an extensive amount of research conducted within the Raritan River Basin itself by Dr. Q et al. About the best, most cost-effective strategies at placing buffers. Some research focuses on hydrologically sensitive areas. These are places that actively generate runoff and are therefore potentially susceptible to transporting contaminants to water bodies. Essentially, the researchers, what they do is they create simulations where they input data for different variables, and the simulation tells them where to place a buffer based on the goals they want to achieve. These factors include soil erodibility, hydrological sensitivity to control runoff, wildlife habitat, and impervious surfaces to better contain stormwater impacts. So it is not enough to build riparian buffers if they are not all connected. Therefore, we need programs to educate landowners with property bordering streams about the importance of buffers. In the Hudson River watershed, there was a program recently called Trees for Shrubs, which did just that. The program recruited community volunteers to plant buffers in residential areas after consent of the property owner. Furthermore, the article highlighted how such a program brought about a strong sense of community, which in turn also creates better environmental awareness. Such a program could definitely work in the Raritan River Basin because many of our watershed organizations already utilize volunteers. Lastly, there are measures in place to be able to monitor the quality of buffers without much work. We can build riparian buffers, but someone has to make sure that they are performing up to standard and do not get degraded over time. Traditionally, scientists have used aerial photos and have physically visited these sites. A paper from the Journal of American Water Resources Association explored high-resolution satellite imagery that allows detailed mapping and monitoring of buffer zone vegetation. In conclusion, riparian buffers are clearly integral to a healthy watershed, especially in New Jersey with the sheer amount of human activity. They are lacking in some areas, among other issues, but with the right approaches, we can implement them in the most cost-efficient manner and help the community.